The medical marijuana industry is thriving in Oklahoma, creating hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue. Now there's a push to make cannabis legal for all adults in our state, but is recreational use of the drug a good idea? That's the topic of this week's in-depth discussion with moderator Susan Cadeau and her guests. Susan?
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, marijuana is a big issue in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma's footprint in the marijuana industry is having an impact nationwide. We have two gentlemen here who can help educate us on what the next footprint might be. I'd like to introduce them to you now. We have Jed Green, who is the director of Oklahomans for Responsible Cannabis Action, and Ryan Kiesel, who is the senior advisor to the Yes on 820 campaign. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for letting us be here. Yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, we're going to do some explanation for our viewers and for myself, starting with Mr. Kiesel. Tell us about State Question 820, and please use layman's terms. What's
Absolutely, in it? Yeah. State Question 820, if approved by the voters in November, would take the next step in sensible marijuana policy in the state of Oklahoma. It would essentially legalize what some call adult use, others call recreational, for adults 21 and over in the state of Oklahoma, and at the same time bring about some common sense criminal justice reforms and provide millions in state revenue for critical state services at the state and local level. And we turned in over 165,000 signatures last week at the Secretary of State's office, and beginning the count. That count is ongoing in the Secretary of State's office right now, with the hopes of qualifying for the November 2022 ballot.
Okay, well, since you brought that up, how many were required?
94,911 are required.
All right, so you've got a pretty wide margin for error there, yes?
That's our hope, yeah. And we turned in well in advance of the August 1 deadline. We did that again with the idea of making sure that we took every possible step that we can to make this question available for the voters to consider coming up in November.
You're answering all the questions I had. I wanted to know what the deadline was. So I'm going to turn to you, Mr. Green. I want you to tell us about your proposal, State Question 18 and 19. First of all, explain what that is, how it differs from 820, and why you've decided to go ahead and move forward with these two questions.
Sure. The state questions 818 and 819 are two separate state questions. 818 is a medical provision, and 819 is a recreational petition. The difference here is that these are both constitutional measures. So they have a higher signature threshold. We're around 179,000 signatures to get those on the ballot. And the reason that we have pushed these forward is that fundamentally rights and freedoms are not rights and freedoms until they're guaranteed in the Constitution. What is done in law by the legislature is simply a privilege, and any sort of court ruling can be easily overturned. And so what we wanted to do was to first and foremost guarantee protections and freedoms for individuals, and then also remove the Oklahoma double standard that is being applied to cannabis businesses, even though they have created over 45,000 jobs in our state. We want them to get the same treatment as other businesses. And so then we also wanted to make sure that we had a provision that benefited the state of Oklahoma as a whole. So those are the kind of the overarching goals of what we're looking to accomplish.
So right now, though, I know medical marijuana or the industry, they cannot use banks right now, correct? Because of federal laws, because marijuana use is still a federal offense?
We can utilize banks. They have to be state chartered banks. There are several banks here in Oklahoma that we are able to use. However, there are severe restrictions, and there is a higher regulatory cost than we would have otherwise.
Does that affect, and Mr. Kiesel, I'm going to ask you, does that affect the state's ability to keep track of sales?
No, the most important thing to be able to keep track of sales is the seed to sale tracking system or track and trace system. That's the most important tool for regulators in the state of Oklahoma to be able to use, or really any state that has a legal marijuana program, whether it's medical or whether it's recreational. And that's the ability to monitor marijuana as it comes onto the system and as it's sold. That's incredibly important, just to in everything from ensuring that we're not seeing diversion to illicit markets, because if we're going to have a legal system, we got to make sure that the people that are playing by the rules, that are paying their taxes, that are testing all their product, that they're the ones that are succeeding. And then also from a product safety standpoint, I'm a medical marijuana patient myself, and I want to know that the products that I'm putting in my body, if there's ever a recall or anything like that, the ability to step out and notify me as a patient, and then in a recreational state as a consumer.
So we are going to be talking with both sides of the issue on this later. These issues have not been brought forward yet as your petition, Mr. Kiesel, is being examined, and you're getting yours together, Mr. Green. This is informational to let people know the what and the why, right? So if we have medical marijuana use, and either one of you or both of you can answer this, why the need for recreational marijuana use?
I think there's a couple of needs. It's not an exhaustive list at all, but the first is revenue. Medical marijuana was never set up and is never intended to be a revenue generating proposition for the state of Oklahoma or any state. It's about medicine for patients. And so the tax revenue that the state has received as a result of that, local and county governments have received as a result of that, is really, an added benefit, but it's not the real driver there. With recreational, revenue does become a primary objective. And so our ability to tax at 15% instead of 7% would generate a lot of revenue for the state of Oklahoma. Second, and certainly not less than that, but second priority is that there are still people that face consequences for low-level marijuana offenses that if they were committed today, and especially if they were committed after 820 becomes law, wouldn't be a crime anymore. And I think that most Oklahomans think, these low-level marijuana offenses, why are we still punishing people for these things on their records? And State Question 820 gives an ability not just in terms of forward-looking sentencing reform, but retroactively gives Oklahomans a very easy, effective, and affordable way to get those things off of their records.
Mr. Green, I want to get your take on this as you look to make this even more permanent as a constitutional issue. What are your thoughts thus far on what we've been discussing?
Sure. As for the need of why recreational, and it's really pretty simple. Really pretty simple to us. It's a freedom issue, and it's an issue of rights. And the reality is that marijuana is here. It has been here, and it is going to be here despite the quote unquote war on drugs and what we have seen over the last 3 generations. And so the question for us as a people and for Oklahoma as a state is, where does the revenue go? Does it go to classrooms or does it go to cartels? It's really that simple. And so, I agree with Ryan that recreational is geared towards a revenue type of a stream, and that's why with 819, if we pass 819, that the 7% excise tax on medical marijuana card holders will be removed. We wanted to make sure that we really put our effort where the thought is and remove that tax on medical card holders. The other thing is to Ryan's point is, we look at, what we call in the community breaking the stigma and normalizing something that has been here and is going to be here. And what we have done in 818 and 819 is gone beyond what we see just with expungements of criminal records. We also go into securing people's more individual rights by prohibiting metabolite testing to determine impairment. In other words, you couldn't get a hair follicle test and get a DUI for marijuana that was used last week. There would have to be a field sobriety test involved.
So why is now the time to address both of these measures at a time when the legislature, the State Medical Marijuana Authority are looking at putting reforms in place and getting a better handle on the industry? Mr. Kiesel, I'll let you answer that one.
Thanks. I think that they are getting a better handle on the industry. I mentioned seed to sale. Oklahoma's seed to sale system is recently online. And I think over the coming months, as you have mandatory compliance there, we're going to see a significant improvement in the state's ability to hold individuals accountable, to enforce actions against the bad actors out there in the state of Oklahoma that aren't playing by the rules, that aren't following the law. And the way that we've set up State Question 820 is to really kind of give state regulators an opportunity to succeed. We have limited for the first 24 months of the license program that only medical marijuana businesses that were in existence in Oklahoma prior to 820, for the first 24 months, they're the ones that are going to get to apply to sell recreational marijuana in the state of Oklahoma. And I think that that's an important buffer to give regulators an opportunity to build this new program on top of the existing program and to do it with the licensees that they have relationships with already. So, we've tried to do everything we can to make sure that regulators have the tools that they need to succeed.
As you go out and gather signatures, both of you, but I'll let Mr. Green answer this question first. You're talking to people who are probably in favor of the measure, but are you talking to people who are opposed to it? And if so, what kinds of pushback are you getting from them?
Well, the number one pushback that we get is people don't want the recreational law to harm the medical marijuana program that we have in place right now. That is the number one pushback that we have. And so that is what we have work to do with 818 and 819 is to have recreational be a plug-in as opposed to an override on the medical marijuana program. Here's a real good example. And this is where we do have a real comparison between 819 and what's in 820. In 819, recreational sales start 60 days from passage. There is no new license application. There's no new license fee. There is no duplicate set of regulations. And so by doing that, we immediately integrate into the existing program. Unfortunately, we don't believe that the legislature or our regulators have done anywhere in the ballpark of a good job the last 4 years with enforcement. And so we believe that we've seen an uptick and we've seen the better activity out of our regulators the last year or so, but they are still woefully behind. And we believe that if you create a new licensing process in a short time frame for recreational, we don't believe that OMMA will be able to actually handle a glut of 8,000 licenses. And so what you do is you create a situation where you've got the state picking the winners and the losers.
Mr. Kiesel, where do you stand on this? And are you in favor of the constitutional measure?
Well, that's why we wrote a statutory measure. I think that regulatory schemes shouldn't be in the Constitution. If you think of where Oklahoma is with alcohol laws and how long it's taken us to get to the point where you can, walk into a convenience store and buy, beer that's, more than 3 point at your local gas station and it's cold, we're looking at a century. And that was because we started out, we were the only state in the nation that started out with prohibition in our Constitution. And we've been working, away from that ever since. I do think that there are certain things that should be in the Constitution, but at the end of the day, regulatory schemes like this don't need to be, and especially with something that we're talking about, a legal market that's only been around for a few years. And I disagree that the legislature and the regulatory bodies aren't able to do their job. I don't like everything that comes out of the legislature. I'm not going to like everything that comes out of the regulatory body. But marijuana is one of those issues. As we've been around the state, and again, we've collected over 165,000 signatures. As we've been around the state, not taking any vote for granted, we believe that this is one of those few issues where Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, where we've got a cross section of support, and we can continue to work on these issues in a bipartisan fashion that's different than most issues out of the legislature. I think of everything that Oklahomans are looking at right now, I think it's very critical to understand that State Question 820 is on track to be on the November 2022 ballot. We've turned in our signatures. We're ready to go, and we're ready to take this campaign to all Oklahomans in all corners of the state and not take a single vote for granted. We believe that we've got a winning message. Our polls indicate that we have a lot of support, but we're going to work hard and explain the campaign and the question to Oklahomans. And if there are things that need to be addressed in the future, that's why it's a statutory measure.
All right, I didn't get through all my questions. As per usual, there is so much to unpack here. But I do want to, Mr. Kiesel, we're waiting to see if the signatures you've collected are valid and enough and good enough to pass muster. Mr. Green, I believe you said you needed 170 some thousand signatures. Are you close to that? And when's the deadline?
Our deadline to turn in is August 24th. And so we are continuing to work statewide to gather those signatures, and we'll get turned in sometime probably around then.
All right, this is great information, straight from the horse's mouth. We want to thank you for your time and your insight into this issue that all Oklahomans will be maybe taking a look at in the near future. Thank you both.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.